present based on what happened last year, how we'll improve those numbers, how we'll provide more value to you, our users, through the launches we have in Q1 in this Connect. Joining us is Sergio Cristancho, our Technical Customer Education Specialist, who will discuss the new features coming to our modules this quarter. To wrap up, we have a special guest, a star at Simetrik, who will talk about a topic I won't spoil. We'll see that later. So I'll hand it over to Atancho, as we affectionately call him, to start telling us what's coming for the Accounting Translator. Data analysis, closing management, and for...
Good morning, everyone. How are you? I hope you're all doing well. My name is Sergio Cristancho. I'm part of the Technical Customer Education Specialist team. So let's see what's new in the tool this quarter. Shall we begin? We'll navigate through various modules and tools, looking at recent updates and upcoming features that will be launched and deployed soon. Let's start by discussing the Accounting Tracker. Currently, the Accounting Tracker is our specialized module for take the entire transactional base, translate it into accounting entries, and communicate it through integration to GRPs in the required format. Now we can delete accounting models when in draft state. We can duplicate models and even edit these draft models. This is a bit of what happens in the translator today. I just mentioned we can connect to GRPs, but we rely on a fantastic team to create these connections. This quarter, we're introducing self-managed connections where you, as users, can enter the Accounting Translator and create these GRP connections. We'll also have structures or the ability to have specific structures for generating reversal entries. That is, when these reversal entry events occur due to transaction changes or other reasons, we'll be able to handle them. Specific structures for this can vary from those we use for regular entries. We'll also be able to connect the Accounting Translator and generate models from advanced reconciliations, which we'll learn about shortly. These are more robust reconciliations with more capabilities to complement the reconciler's portfolio. Let's move on to data analysis, which we'll cover briefly. Please, if anyone has questions or doubts, raise your hand or leave a comment and we'll address it during the session. Now, for data analysis, we currently have the ability to view monitors for sources and reconciliations. For those unfamiliar, monitors are visual tools within data analysis that allow us to track and trace everything that happens with our source files. Well-loaded files, empty arrivals, or errors, a history of data loads over time on our sources, and now linked to monitors, we can have alarms that alert us when specific events occur related to our sources. These alarms differ from conciliator alarms, complementing our existing alarm portfolio. Users will also be able to subscribe to these alarms. Once created, when events occur, people can access and choose to subscribe. Please feel free to double-click on any topic I'm discussing here. Contact your CSS if interested. Our education team will gladly schedule time and provide documentation on how this currently works. We also have visual graphs, KPIs, and a wide range of features of dashboards where we have individual KPIs, bar charts, line graphs, and dot plots. We also have collapse bars that are close together. We'll soon have improvements to the pivot tables, which is one of the visuals we have within our dashboards. These come with new features that will allow for greater depth and flexibility in data summarization. The pivot table is something we're familiar with from various sources. We also have our action log, which is robust in this release. It comes with updates, more information, and better traceability, allowing you to track everything that happens in the workspace. As you know, the action log is part of the data analysis section. The data here differs from what you'll find in the reconciler. In data analysis, you can track what happens in the Accounting Translator and data analysis, as well as the executions linked to these modules. The reconciler has its own process log associated with it. All right, let's move on. Now, this module is new. It was released last quarter, the final quarter of 2024. It's our module for closing accounting periods in FinOps teams, representing Simetrik's aim to cover the entire FinOps process. Currently, in the closure management module, we can create certification rules. We can set parameters to verify that accounting reconciliations, balance sheets, and totals are correct. This is managed through two roles within the module. There's a preparer who loads everything and provides support, and a verifier who audits it's correct. This avoids the duality of someone being both judge and party. We can automate, monitor, and control the process. We also have account groups where we can create all the accounting accounts needed for our closings and establish accounting periods. From that, where we can activate or deactivate depending on how we're closing. We can set expirations, dates for reconciliations, and establish those limits. Now, what's coming this quarter? Because that's what we have now. What's next? We have risk management, mapping risks, and linking them to reconciliations. We can integrate with the Accounting Translator. Today, the closure management module is somewhat independent. It's a way to upload and audit info to generate the closure. We'll integrate with the translator to auto-generate accounting entries from the transactional base. We're linking this chain, and this quarter we'll see it become reality. We also have variation analysis. We'll set up grouping levels for ledger accounts and create reports explaining variations. We'll establish thresholds for account behavior and track it through closure management. That's what's coming this quarter with closure management. We invite questions. This module is quite interesting. Now we move on to integrations. And when I talk about integrations, today we have the integrations module, which you can see in the tool at the top, and it's currently only for data output. Note that we also have input connections in the reconciler now, and the translator itself can connect externally. But now, from the reconciler, from all the reconciler's elements, the data export, the integrations module can automatically and recurrently generate data extraction and deposit it in an S3 or Google Cloud of your choice, where you can later access that information. Currently, data export gives you visibility of available executions. It's a dashboard where you can see all data exports made. You'll have a new view to configure exports, deciding what to generate as an output routine. There's also a view for new events where you can set up exports for deleted source files. You can configure exports to get info from accounting or transactional models generating entries. Now, this is what we have today. What's coming this quarter? It's crucial. We're going to do something we've been exploring with some clients, but now we're giving you the tools to make it easier, which are landing zone repositories. What does this mean? As the data export will output information in text format and can store it in S3 or Google Cloud, we at Simetrik can consume that same information. In other words, in some cases, clients need to generate data that's already processed and reconciled to later feed a source and generate further analyses or cross-checks. In some cases, they're called regularizations. In others, they're given different names, but essentially, it means that with Simetrik, we'll be able to feed back into Simetrik and generate new analysis and cross-check processes. We bring this with the landing zone repositories. Additionally, we have data export that can connect to advanced reconciliations. As I mentioned, we'll explore this shortly with our special guest. These advanced reconciliations will soon connect with data export, which is crucial. That's what we have for integrations this quarter. Now, if you're not familiar with Simetrik Assistant, I encourage you to check it out. It's available to anyone with Simetrik access. When you enter Simetrik, you'll notice small purple stars in the top right corner. In this image, you can see 3 tiny stars in the upper right, though they're quite small. Clicking there opens a small window with 3 options or frames. These are 3 ways to interact with Simetrik Assistant in chatbot mode, where we can chat and type. Currently, we have 2 ways to interact with the Simetrik Assistant. This chatbot mode I'm describing allows us to make queries about the tool. We can ask Simetrik explain Accounting Translator or accumulated balance grouping for info. We can say, Simetrik, I have a source called bank statement from any bank. I need you to show me a graph displaying daily income by payment channel. He'll show you a live graph in the chat, exemplifying this data in real time. For configurators, you can ask the assistant to create a transformation column that classifies text as debit or credit based on its first digits, or determine if it's MasterCard, Amex, or Visa from the card's first numbers. We can ask these things and Simetrik will show the formula and its execution. If it works for you, you can take it to the resource and replicate it. We can do this in chat and configurators will get assistant suggestions. When you create a data merge, it'll suggest columns. When you cast or format a date column, it'll suggest the format. And that's how we have it today. We have that interaction in data merging, the assistant's help with column formatting, and these customized conversations. What's coming this quarter for the assistant? We'll have help setting up barriers, which is super important. Now the assistant will step in when we're setting up a reconciliation to suggest which fields we could match. This is based on the assistant's experience with standard databases without accessing your specific data. Super important. It's a compliance and security matter. Simply from its experience with column names and types of matches, Simetrik Assistant will suggest, hey, I see 2 reference columns, 1 per resource, maybe use them for crossovers too. We'll also have insights on the reports. Assistant will suggest data analysis options and ways to track the information we have. Christian, hello, how are you? Hello, good morning, how are you? A question about assistance. I use it often for rule building and similar tasks, but lately, I've been getting messages saying my question can't be answered by assistant as it's outside its mode scope. I've tried with supervisor and builder roles. Both give the same result. When these messages appear, what does it mean? Well, I'd need to see the prompt. There are 2 things to consider, and this can happen across the tool. First, as AI, it has good and bad practices, which applies to all AI systems associated with what we're asking it. However, since you use it often, I'll assume you're quite skilled with prompts. If you encounter anything that seems unusual or atypical, I'd ask you to reach out either to your CSM or submit a ticket to our support team and we'll promptly investigate what happened to determine if it's something outside Simetrik's standard features or functionalities we offer, or if it's indeed an atypical response from the AI that we need to correct, adjust, or provide guidance on. Does that sound good? Yes, because I was using it normally, asking a question it had answered before, but for a different case. And it gave me those messages. I also just asked a simple question like, how do I create a transformation column? How did you handle it? And the message appears in red saying, query error, please try refreshing the page. I refresh the page and ask again, but the same thing appears. Okay, could you take a screenshot of that and create a ticket? Are you familiar with the Help Center? Do you know how to create support tickets? Yes, sir. Great, please do that and tag your CSM. We'll review it right away. Thanks for letting us know. Thank you. I'd also like to extend an open invitation to everyone at Simetrik. We're not trying to claim that nothing will ever go wrong. Issues can occur with internet and connections, but what we can guarantee is that we'll always be here to support you and fix any problems that arise. So please feel free to contact us through the usual channels, either your CSM or a support ticket. That's all we have for this quarter regarding the Simetrik Assistant. To wrap up all the updates, let's dive into what's new in the reconciler, our most robust module that feeds the rest. Now I'll hand it over to Leo for the presentation. Well, thanks, Tancho, for that spot-on explanation. This guy's a pro. He really knows his stuff. Now, as I mentioned, we'll present yesterday's release of the Universal Reconciler, bringing a completely new way to reconcile. It won't replace the old one. Both will coexist, but I won't spoil it. I'm no expert. The real pro will present it.
Hello everyone, my name is Micaela, I'm a customer education specialist, and we are going to talk about advanced reconciliation. In the Universal Reconciliator, in this version 1.0, we are going to introduce what we call advanced reconciliations. The first version we release, this will be labeled as data. But what are advanced reconciliations? If you look at the sidebar, there are reconciliations as they exist today, as a resource, as a configuration. They will continue to function as you are used to. However, these advanced reconciliations will be a new type of configuration or resource. What is involved in these advanced reconciliations? Well, after reviewing and understanding different use of cases and the configurations that our clients, you as a user and a customer, implement within the application, we realized that we needed to introduce a new type of configuration with more capabilities. This new configuration should be able to handle multiple processes that today need to be done in separate steps. Currently, there are long configuration and complex sequences. First, you need to configure one part, then use the result to compare against a grouping, and then obtain the disaggregated details of that group. Today, you need to create multiple reconciliations along the way to achieve this. The goal of advanced reconciliations is to consolidate all these cases into a single configuration. So I will go over the theoretical elements, explaining the concepts clearly so that we can understand what happens in the system when an advanced reconciliation is executed or configured. After that, we'll move into a demo. I have a small case to show you directly within the product. So let's compare the standard flow, the reconciliations you already know, within the new reconciliation flow. It's like having all the sweeps in a single screen at once. Sweep 1 with their own rules, sweep 2 with their rules. In the new configuration flow, we go sweep by sweep. Why? Because we have different type of sweeps. Thus, within the standard process, there are only reconciliation sweeps. I am simply comparing A to B, considering columns from A, columns from B, and the criteria for matching them. Meanwhile, in the new configuration, we will have two types of sweeps. We will have the reconciliation sweeps. We are on side I, where I will search for the records on the other side based on matching criteria. But we also have the compensation sweeps, which means that within the same resource, I will look for matches within that same source. This is also known as zero effect. In the new configuration, in the new reconciliation process, we will have the same logic, but we will also introduce a grouped logic. What does group logic imply? It means that I can configure a calculation instructing the system to first take these records, group them, and once they are grouped, then attempt to find a match on the counterpart or even within itself for a compensation or zero effect. The idea is that compensation sweeps eliminate the need to create an intermediate reconciliation that currently serves this function, as well as the need for grouped calculation sweeps. The idea is to eliminate the need for manually taking sources, grouping them, and performing reconciliations in separate states, one for detail to detail and other for detail to grouped. Instead, this logic can now be incorporated directly within the same configuration. Type of matching: in the current reconciliations, we have one-to-one, end-to-end, end-to-one, and one-to-end matching types. Meanwhile, the new configuration follows a one-to-one approach. A record can be reconciled only once against another, even if it's grouped. If it is grouped, multiple records reconcile against one. But this is because the aggregation of those records meets the matching criteria with respect to the other. Do's and don'ts. What can and cannot be done with these first advanced reconciliations? This is a new type of reconciliations that does not affect the previous ones in any way. Users can continue using the existing reconciliations without any issues. You can reconcile sources, union of sources, source opening, and the current reconciliations can still be reconciled. However, advanced reconciliations cannot be used as inputs for other advanced reconciliations. Why? Because the purpose of advanced reconciliations is to eliminate the need for chaining multiple configurations together. Instead, all those configurations can now be applied at once. Additionally, we keep in all configurations within a single reconciliation. The process performs much better than a chain of reconciliations would in achieving a final result. Additionally, by keeping all configurations within a single reconciliation, the process performs much better than a chain of reconciliations would in achieving a final result. We will have the standard actions such as unmatch and reverse adjustments. In the version 1.1, we'll introduce manual reconciliation, which will be available around February 18th. Version 1.2 will include manual compensation, manual zero effect, expect between March and April. There is an important point here. A new column will be introduced, identified as the hash ID. This column indicates the group of transactions that matched. It will now show you why this column is crucial when interpreting the results. When dealing with the group sweeps, we can group both sides of the reconciliation, group only one side, or not group at all, which would work as reconciliations do today. Chain columns cannot be added because there is no chaining element, as the entire sequence is meant to be a configuration in itself. Groupings cannot be used within advanced reconciliations. Why? Because advanced reconciliations already allow grouping to find matches. Additionally, advanced reconciliations cannot be used to create another advanced reconciliations or to generate all or existing reconciliations, so to speak. This is very important. The idea of these advanced reconciliations is that they should be the final step of the configuration. I perform by enrichment processes with the sources, create my union of source, do the once-to-many reconciliations to enrich the data, and finally, I generate my advanced reconciliation, which incorporates all the logic I need to close the control. So, group it is. This is how the interface looks. We will see it directly within the application shortly. Essentially, I enter, choose grouping criteria and aggregation values of criteria, such as sum, count, etc. It will show me that it's grouped, and then I can select the matching rules. No extra grouping is created, no resource or aggregated databases is generated. What happens is that when the reconciliation is executed, when that sweep runs, it first performing the group calculations. Once grouped, it goes to find the match. If no match is found, nothing happens. It simply undoes the grouping and continues with the calculation for the next sweep. What the system will try to do is take the database, and if that sweep is grouped, it will group those records and try to find a match on side B or side A. I can group side A, side B, or both. That covers group sweeps. Now let's talk about compensation sweeps. Look at the interface. When we enter, the system will ask us what type of sweep we want to create, reconciliation or compensation. If we choose compensation, we will be working with that we call compensable groups, which are quite different from reconcilable groups. It's an important distinction. The compensable group is about how we partition data when looking for a zero effect match. Essentially, how do we structure our data to find these compensations pairs? Or one more than one pair? Because I can also use, for example, group calculation criteria in these cases. The clearest example is that I take the column, let's say transaction type, and it turns out that the transaction type separates the same databases in 2 or 3 groups. credits, debits, and chargebacks. And compensation makes sense to happen between credits and debits. So I separate credits from debits, which are part of the same side. And then I select the matching criteria to achieve, let's say, that zero effect and ensure the transactions are netted. Conceptually, what would be happening is that the same database would be separated into groups, one for credits and the other for debits. And by making this separation, I then apply the matching rules. The credit and debit must then have the same 4 digits of the cards, the same acquired, the same brand, and the same amount. But I already know that one is credit and the other side is debit. And that's where the effect zero comes. So to speak, the net effect comes into play. And well, this is how they would look. Conceptually, the results are displayed under those colors to make them much more evident. And this is where the hash ID, an important component, comes into play. For example, what does the sweep mean? These 4 blue records on side A reconcile with these blue records on side B. So this is a group sweep, where side A is group and side B is not. If I sum the amounts, 100% plus 8090 plus 2,140 plus 1,08070, it will get the 5,000. So this code that we are calling external and this amount we are calling authorization code, they are matching rules here. So here's how it will look. Records reconcile through group sweeps. Similarly, in yellow, another group sweep will appear, but in this case, both A and B are grouped. 2 records from A reconcile against 2 records from B, but the reconcile is a group manner. 100 plus 150 is 250, and 200 plus 50 is 250. So there is an aggregation criteria. They have the same external code. Let's say this same code is the same. And by adding the values, that's where the match is. 2 against 2, but not necessarily 1 to 1, and the other with the other, which would be, for example, this sweep 3, right? This is how we present the results today in the current reconciliations. It's one matching with one from the other side. So they appear side by side because it's an exact match. In the other cases, we're talking about group match. And this last sweep will be a compensation sweep, where this record from A, this cell compensates, or has a zero effect, a net effect with this return. And then we have that compensation. There is no information from B because what is being compensated, the match is found in A. The status for what compensate will be offset. So now we'll have a reconcile, offset, and a reconcile status. The hash ID is important because it is now the column that groups the records that are part of the same batch that reconciled, and that group itself is a match. So now we move to this point. The configuration is once again side A and side B. Here I go into advanced reconciliations, select the side, and choose the reconcilable group, which is a subset of the information to be reconciled. We configure sweeps, and when we enter sweep configurations, we see this interface. When I add a sweep, the system asks whether it's a reconciliation sweep or a compensation sweep. What do you want to do in this case? And replicating a bit of what we saw here in the presentation, this same example is as follows. We have sweep 1, which is a group sweep, where side A is group and side B is not. The group calculation I have here is group by this column called external and sum the amount. And once the calculation is done, compare it externally against the code and ensure the amount is equal. It's a pretty simple configuration. I save the sweep and then continue with the next one. Now we have the second sweep, the yellow one. So on this side, I have both sides, A and side B, grouped. In both cases, I select the criteria by which I'm grouping, as well as the value I'm aggregating, right? And I generate the matching criteria. Done. Now I move to sweep 3, which is the case it's a simple sweep, meaning a one-to-one match between side A and side B, which is what we know today. In this case, they are not group calculations. These matching rules simply needs to be fulfilled. And in sweep 4, we have a compensation. In a compensation, I select which side I want to compensate and configure what is compensable group. In this case, I say I want net returns with sales, right? So if I return and the sales have the same amount, they have a compensate. Then I save the sweep. Once this is done, I'll show you this, which is before confirming the calculation and execution of these sweeps. We already have the result. The hash ID column is important because those sharing is the same hash ID are part of that batch, which is precisely, so to speak, this result. 4 records from A reconciles again 1 record from B. Here we have the 5 records from the same hash ID in reconcilable status, referring the group sweep 1, and here we have the records from A against the records from B. Here is also the records from A, those 4 records from A against this record from B, where the sum of these gives me 5,000. The next one is group sweep number 2, where 2 records from A reconciles again 2 records from B. Here are the 4. They share the same hash ID. The simple sweep is a one-to-one match from A to B. And on the open side, the compensate one is a one-to-one match from A to A. They share the same hash ID, where this return matches this cell with the same amount. So I confirm this. I confirm these reconciliations and the result. And once it's confirmed, I'll go to the spreadsheet where I have the actions I mentioned, like creating columns, making adjustments, reversing adjustments, and performing unmatching. Recommendation on sweeps. Always try to make the most robust sweeps the first ones. And then if you start adding tolerance elements, place them in the sweeps lower down in the order. Precisely because, and as I just mentioned before, the system executes them in order. So if we set a sweep to something very loose, anything could match with anything. However, if I ensure strong matches in each sweep, I can be confident that as I start adding tolerance levels, the probability of no match becomes lower and lower, because what I needed to match has already matched. As I mentioned, manual reconciliation will have a very similar interaction to what we already have today, but with a more user-friendly UI, and we're also adding a bit more aesthetics to the process. The same goes for adjustments. We will have the option to adjust and reserve records. And as of February 18th, we are talking about manual reconciliation, which is similar to what we have today for current reconciliations, but improvement, with a clear interface. And we also know that sometimes having all this information with its certain screen sizes can be limiting. So specifically for manual reconciliations, I will be able to place spreadsheets side by side or one below the other to make the comparisons I need to make. So here, the adjustment functionality comes into play again. There has to be a filter applied, in this case in the API. The uncompensated functionality will also be available, meaning that we can't change records from offset status back to the unreconciled. In this case, an automatic compensation didn't result in what we expected, an unreconciled, which means changing records from reconciled to unreconciled. It's a pretty important and large feature, and honestly, our goal is to change the way use cases are configured. No, puta, hice una larga pausa al pedo. Para. 3, 2, 1, va. It's a pretty important and large feature, and honestly, our goal is to change the way use cases are configured, providing much more versatility. As I mentioned, this will help you a lot. We've also replicated internally with use cases we've studied. It greatly helps reduce configuration time because it's... Ay, no sé lo que me pasa. It greatly helps reduce configuration times because I no longer need to create long chains, but instead... Dios. It greatly helps reduce configuration time because I no longer need to create long chains, but instead I use... no. I just need to understand the logic of the sweeps that should be applied and it was in... No puedo hablar. No puedo hablar. Voy a voltar de celo. It greatly helps reduce configuration times because I no longer need to create long chains, but instead, I just need to understand the logic of the sweeps that should be applied and in what order. And this is all done in a single configuration. I have many levels of editing that I didn't have when creating those chains. And at any time, I can create a version with changes and modify the way calculations are done. I can adjust the group criteria, compensation criteria, and reconciliation criteria. I can add new sweeps or remove something that might no longer follow the appropriate business logic. And well, if I already have a productive case with a long chain, it was extremely difficult to make those changes. It was very rigid structured, so they give us that versatility. The invitation is to use it, especially with the most complex use cases, to start exploring it and to share with us how it has been, how you've been to experience this. Vamos de vuelta. The invitation is to use it, especially with the most complex use cases, to start exploring it and to share with us how it has been, how you begin to experience this. And I would say try to address all those use cases that are chains. I have one source and then what's left from one is reconciled with another and what's left against another and so on. I would suggest creating a union for all of this and with that source and the advanced reconciliations. The complexity of that configuration will likely be significantly reduced, and we will also have something that performs much better. This concludes our overview of the new features in Simetrik. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.